morning. Nice to see you here. So I'm not so much into the Flink community, but more into the Apache Software Foundation community. So why I'm giving this talk here? Well, apparently Flink is one of the projects of the ASF, and we would like to share a little bit about how those projects in general are being governed and run, so you understand better in which kind of situation you've found yourself here. A little bit of a warning, this talk in similar versions has been given under the title Apache Way by quite a large bunch of people on several locations, so this is really a community effort. Why am I giving this talk? I'm an open source strategist at Europace. What we do is to connect banks with end users through our infrastructure. There I'm the open source strategist explaining how all this open source stuff works, and more interestingly, how to take the collaboration processes and patterns and roll them out inside of an enterprise. That's also called inner source or inner source commons. But this is not supposed to be the topic here. I'm here with my Apache hat on my head, like the imaginative head. I happen to be a member of the ASF. What that means, we will learn in a bit if you don't know it. I also happen to be a board member right here. I'm just someone who knows something about how stuff works at the ASF. I'm not here to lecture you as a board member of how you have to behave there. I'm a co-founder of Apache Mahout, which was one of the first AI machine learning large-scale projects at Apache. Co-founder of Berlin Buzzwords, which is oh, we've got a t-shirt there, which is a conference on all things scalability, storage, and search here in Berlin in June. Plus co-founder of FOSS Backstage. So if you want to know how open source works behind the scenes, how these people communicate, how they collaborate, and how they deal with conflicts, and how the entire business questions are being addressed, go to FOSS Backstage in June next year. But let me get started on this funny Apache Way thingy. Why should you even care? Hands up if you're using Flink. Half. Keep your hands up if you've contributed something back to the project. 1, 2, okay. 3. 3 in a green t-shirt. So why should you care how this project works if you are using it in production or if you are planning to use it in production? Well, apparently you're planning to put your core business operations on top of a component which will be very central to your infrastructure. So it should be interesting to you to know how decisions concerning roadmap are being taken, how people are dealing with bug fixes, how people are dealing with prioritizing security issues, and how they are being taken care of. And it should be interesting to you to understand whether or not you can have an influence on that roadmap, and whether or not you yourself can become active in this project. So Flink, as many other projects, is an Apache project. What's this funny Apache thingy? There's a mission statement there. The mission of the ASF, the Apache Software Foundation, is to provide software for the public good by providing services and support for like-minded software project communities of individuals who willingly choose to join. What's important here? First of all, the foundation exists in order to support those projects. They don't create them, they support them. What's also important is that those projects are composed of communities of individuals. So it's not a place where company A and company B goes and those two companies somehow collaborate. It's individuals who happen to be employed by someone who then collaborate on those projects. It's funded by individual donations and corporate sponsorships. It's a very standard US 501c3 non-profit charitable organization, and it's almost 20 years old by now. So how does this work? We've seen a couple of users here. So the first time you become somewhat visible in such a project is as a user, say of Apache Flink. Now, if you're anything like me, at some point you will find something that doesn't work quite well. Documentation may not be excellent, there may be a little typo in the docs, there may be something in the source codes that you want to change, and that's when you can start to think about how to make changes. I started thinking about contributing to open source back in 2004. And I was once asked what my biggest mistake was. My biggest mistake when I started was to try and create the perfect patch before publishing it. Why? Because it never was published, because apparently it never becomes perfect. So there's a saying in the Lucene Solar community which is called the Onyx Law of Patches. A half-baked patch in your issue tracker with no documentation, no tests, no backwards compatibility is better than no patch at all. So get started now, get it out there, get feedback from the community that is already active, such that you don't spend weeks and months and years polishing something that isn't going to be accepted anyway. If you do that often enough, that's what I once was told by a new committer at Mahout. His path towards committership wasn't to contribute some large, big new feature, it was just to churn out more and more of these patches and improvements up to the point where, I'm quoting him, the existing committers were tired of committing his stuff and were giving him write access. So that's when you essentially become a committer. Who decides who becomes a committer? That's a project management committee. There's management in there. Does that mean that they set roadmap or direction? No, they don't. They are just the ones who are being held accountable for releases, and they are the ones voting new committers in. There's one person in there who's called the PMC chair. Is he the god of the project? Of course not. So one of the major tasks that he has is to provide oversight, to provide a link to the board, and to write a very boring community-related report every quarter and send it to the board of directors to say whether everything is okay or whether there are some issues in there. So I mentioned before that I'm a member of that foundation. How does that happen? There's like roughly 700 members worldwide on all continents. As soon as you become active in more than one project, or as soon as you become like a PMC chair, or as soon as you become active on a broader scale, say you organize events for projects, or you do some community work in there, someone within the foundation will nominate you to become a member of the ASF. Membership here just means that you do not have to pay membership fees, but you are invited, and then you can say, yes, I want to be there, or no, I don't, for whatever reasons. So as members, do they set technical direction for projects? Clearly not, because this is in the domain of these people. What they do is to elect a board of directors, and they are then responsible to make sure that services are provided for projects. What services am I speaking about? There's a legal team dealing with legal and licensing issues. There's a security team dealing with security issues, that they are being routed to the correct projects and being taken care of there. There's a trademarks team that deals with registering trademarks and that helps with communications in case of infringements. Plus there's a press and marketing team and many more that help projects grow successfully. So who am I talking about? 20 years ago, well, nearly 20 years ago, these people created that foundation. Why did they do that? They were relying on something called a web server, HTTPD, which was developed at the university. At some point in time, the key developer of this web server didn't want to spend any more time on it, so they were kind of like left in the air. They banded together, they were starting to exchange patches, which is why it's Apache web server. And at some point, they needed a legal entity to put this name to. It needed to belong to someone. If any one of you ever created a group of like-minded people and wanted to put a URL in there, you will have to need a bank account to pay this URL through. You can do this through your private bank account, but then you're dependent on this one individual. That's not something you want to do if you want to grow at a longer time scale. That's how this foundation came to be. And some of that history and heritage you still see in the values that are being held up and you talk to Apache people. So there is a term called, it's a volunteer-driven foundation. Now, I'm German native speaker. If I translate volunteer to German, what comes out is Freiwillige. What I think of as a German, when I hear the term Freiwillige, is Freiwillige Feuerwehr. That's the volunteer firefighters that are not being paid to do what they do. So this is not what this is about when they talk about volunteer work. What they talk about is that there is someone who is using this web server in production, who is paid to make this work, and who finds an issue, fixes it, and then maybe goes away again. And at some later point, he finds another issue, he comes back. So it ebbs and flows. It tries to bring together people who work on a full-time scale with people who work on like a part-time scale on a non-predictable time scale. So this is what the entire We Are Volunteer-driven kind of means. So what is it? What's encoded as well? Those were people who came from independent companies. Some of them were freelancers. They came from various different geolocations. What's been part of Apache's culture from the very beginning is that it's a neutral ground for people to collaborate. Bertrand once translated it as being the Switzerland of open source. So if you have multiple companies or independent people who want to collaborate on one project, this is where you go. So it's also a warning that I gave to the Flink people long before they joined the foundation, that if you come to the foundation and you build a startup on top, it won't be possible to be the benevolent dictator of that project. So is always the door open for others to enter that space and to collaborate on eye level. From a user's perspective, again, this is of course very positive because it means that you, together with those currently driving the project, can collaborate and become part of the team, even if you're not part of the company or the companies, depending on the project. So what do we think about? As a user first, we have to look at the copyright. When developing open source, there's a multitude of license types. There's copyleft, there's non-copyleft. Depending on what you want to do, you can strategically license your open source project. For users of Apache projects, it's very easy. Everything at the ASF is Apache license 2.0. Nothing else. So very business-friendly, very easy to use. In terms of patents, I'm not going to go into too much details because there's dragons waiting for me, but it does have a patent clause in the license itself. In terms of trademarks, why is that important? If you're a user, you don't want to get confused by multiple distributors giving you binaries of the same project. Think about, say, something like open source, like OpenOffice. You don't want to download it from a dubious website where the binary potentially includes malware or vaporware or whatever. So you want a very clear understanding that what is Flink, what is labeled as Flink actually contains Flink. So this is why people at the ASF are fairly picky about protecting their trademarks, is in order to protect their downstream users. Now, those are the easy parts, right? Those are just the legal parts. Let's get to the slightly more messy parts, which are the people issues. At Community, one slogan is to put community over code. Or to translate it, a project without people is a dead project. Well, or at least people sleep. I did see open source projects wake up 10 years after not having seen a commit, but, well, you still need a community. What does community mean? You remember the pyramid from before. Community starts with the users, with downstream users. And the funny thing at the ASF is that those users aren't seen as customers, but as potential co-developers, as potential people to recruit to help you out. And this is a different setting from, say, commercial software, but it's also a different setting from many other open source projects. So here again, for visualization, it really starts with the user, where the intention is to treat them just like they would be co-developers. Where do we find those people? We do find them on Twitter. I've seen an experiment being run by someone called Chris Medman, who comes from NASA. And there was a flame war on Twitter going on about a different open source project at Apache, and what he did was to pull these people back into the mailing list. And guess what? It actually happened. It actually worked. So these people doing those flame wars over there suddenly took to the mailing list, wrote a longer version of what they were complaining about, and suddenly all the flame and fire was gone, and there was a better discussion going on. Where do you find users as well? You find them on Stack Overflow, and some of the people, yes, they do have Google Alerts tracking for mentions of their project names, just to see what's going on. How do you reach users? You go to the press. We do have a press and marketing community. Many of the committers, long-term committers, do have links to popular press publications, say Heise in Germany, for instance. So once you do have users, what you've got to provide is support. For many of the ASF projects, there are third-party companies like data artisans offering support and help for your deployment. There's an Ask Me Anything session scheduled later on. Here's my funny invitation to you. There's an Ask Me Anything session going on 24/7 online, which is user at flink.apache.org. Go to the mailing list, ask your questions there, make sure that it wasn't asked before. I will tell you later how. And most likely people will answer you. So how does this communication work? Typically, if you are in a corporate setting, you are hopefully in a pizza-sized team where mass media works, where you can talk with anybody and make plannings that way. Flink and many other projects are much bigger than that, so they need a slightly different approach to communication. What they have is several central hubs. There's likely an issue tracker, here with the wrong logo. There's likely mailing lists. Why on earth are they insisting on those funny mailing lists? It's not just because I like Thunderbird, it's because many of the toolings that we've built is built around a concept where you do have messages that you archive. If you want to learn about what these people were talking about in 1995 before the ASF was founded in terms of HTTPD, you can still go to the archive and read it right now. They wanted behind stable links, such that you don't have to repeat yourself when you link to conversations and to decisions that have been made. And those links are supposed to be stable for 20 years. Plus, they want those archives to be searchable. Because if there is an archive of more than 20 years of emails, you don't want to sift through them manually. So there's a rule there, which is if it didn't happen on the mailing list, it didn't happen. Does that mean that Flink Forward didn't happen because we are now not like on a mailing list? No, clearly not. There's still a lot of value in having face-to-face communication. When I see people fighting online on mailing lists, it usually helps to put them on a video chat or buy them a beer or a coffee or a tea and get them on the same table. It's just a bit expensive if one of them is in Sydney and the other one is in North America. It still happens. The only rule behind that is if you are discussing things that may lead to a decision, you take this discussion back to the mailing list, such that people that are sitting in Sydney and not right here in Berlin can still participate and can still say, hey, this is a bad idea, or can reinforce and say, hey, this is a very good idea, or they can refine it and make a different decision come out of it. So which lists are there? Typically, there's a user list, there's a dev list. Clearly, user is for everyone using it. Hey, something's not running right. Hey, Docker doesn't work quite well. Dev is for all of the roadmap decisions, fine, detailed, granular decisions that are at the development level. What else do we have? There's typically every commit that goes to the repository is mirrored to a mailing list. Every issue that's being created and all the traffic that goes through that is, again, on a mailing list. All of that publicly archived and searchable. What do you need to remember all of the EasyML mailing list manager commands to deal with these lists? Today, not anymore. There is a list.apache.org, which has a searchable archive, which does support threading. You even can post your messages through that. There's an exception to the rule. I mentioned before that everything is on a public mailing list. Imagine those discussions about you becoming a committer being in public and the decision being no. That's not very comfortable. Imagine a security issue coming in. You are a user, there's no patch there, but all of the people who want to exploit it know about your security issues. That's not very comfortable as well. So there are exceptions to the rule. People issues are being discussed in private, and security issues as well. Private here means every project has a private list. This private list is accessible to all of the PMC people, but also to all Apache members. You remember these 700 people? They can read this as well. So if there is something going on this private list which shouldn't be there, if there is some politics going on that should really be public, this is going to be pointed out. Okay, so how are these decisions typically being made? If you're a downstream user and you're like, I want this feature, and you've publicly stated that you want feature X already, you probably have heard the term patches welcome already. Does that mean that someone's pushing you away? We don't want your patch? No, typically not. It means that someone's overloaded and they really want to pull you in. Remember that people are seeing you as co-developers. This is where this happens. They want to get you become active. How are people making decisions? They are not voting all the time. There's such a concept as lazy consensus. What does lazy consensus mean? I state, I want to do X, and I will start 2 days from now. And if no one shouts at me, and if no one speaks up, I can just go along. So people can remain lazy. I've seen it, yeah, it's fine, go ahead. Why 2 days? Remember those time zones. Remember that there is holidays on various different days in the world, and that people sometimes want some time off. That's where the 72-hour wait period typically comes from. If it's harder to reach consensus, people start with voting. +1 means yes for it, -1 means no, I don't want that. 0 is like, meh, I don't care. Is -1 a veto? No, typically not. It's a veto only in case of code modifications, and even there it has to be well reasoned through. So there has to be a good explanation for it. But typically it's those who do the work are the ones who take the decisions. Taken to the extreme, there's a Apache members meeting in Berlin irregularly. If I'm organizing it, I'm putting it on a schedule where it fits me. So I have a little child at home, so typically it will be a brunch setting or breakfast setting. Everyone who complains to me that this Apache members meeting should be in the evening, really at 7 p.m., I tell them, hey, all it takes to make this Apache members meeting happen is for you to call a restaurant, book a table for, say, 10 people. If you want it at 7 p.m., go book that table and announce when it is. Like patches welcome, taken to the extreme. I wouldn't do this with something like Flink forward, because setting up and Flink forward is like a little bit more work than setting up a breakfast session. Okay, remember this list.apache.org thingy? That's an Apache project as well. If there's something missing, and yes, there are a lot of things missing or things that you could improve, go there, help them out. They are in the incubator, which means they are actively looking to increase their community. Okay, so you've submitted your first patch. What happens? Well, clock starts ticking, right? You're on a regular work schedule. You only have so much time to work on it. What happens is that or at least what should happen, is that existing committers go to a great effort to provide you feedback very quickly so that you can improve your patch such that it goes in very quickly. If you receive this feedback very late, say days, weeks, or months after you've created the patch, motivation goes down to actually make those modifications and get it back in, because context switching is hard, and apparently, most likely, you've moved on to a different topic already. What many projects do, I know it explicitly from Apache Hadoop, is to provide the first round of feedback automatically. So there is a bot checking whether you've got tests, whether you've got code style violations, etc. Such that within a couple of minutes to hours, depending on Jenkins load, you receive your feedback. Something that we learned from Apache Beam is that reviews for existing patches, that's not something that only committers can do. It's also something that contributors can do who do not have write access already. You learn something about the code, you already have good coding experience, so you already can provide valuable feedback. For Apache Beams, this is a very good way to coach new people into the project. Because there the rule is that either the patch itself or the review has to be done by a committer. And this way, new contributors learn the ropes early on. How do you say thank you? For me personally, chocolate works, preferably Swiss chocolate. And yes, I did have Swiss chocolate being shipped to me to Orania at Berlin Buzzwords once. Jokes aside, what works slightly better is saying thank you. And I don't mean someone going out and saying thank you to everything. There's such a concept called a qualified thank you. Thank you for having done X because it helped me do Y better. Why on earth would you do that? A, it sounds much more believable. But B, it also means that the person gets a slight idea of where to continue contributing. Why was this helpful and where should I continue? Plus, thank you as publicly as possible. For my first ever patch that went to JBoss back then, what I received was a thank you in the issue tracker, including my name, a thank you in the commit message, again including name, plus in the release notes. Do I like finding my name online? Absolutely not. However, I could take those references, go to my manager and say, hey, look, this is where we made a contribution. Funny things that happened afterwards was that this manager went to the EU and got an EU research project where a requirement was to be active in the open source space. So this public thank you actually does help lower the barrier for those who are not already known open source contributors to become more active and convince their higher-ups. What do I speak about when I talk about contributions? Typically, when people think about open source, they think about source contributions. At Apache, there's a Apache project maturity model. That's not a must to follow that. However, it's best practice, and many projects do that. One of the most important things that I remember there is that contributions include not only source code, but also documentation, constructive bug reports, discussions, marketing, generally anything that adds value. Some projects are better at tracking that, some projects are worse, but typically everything you do to help the project is something that should be rewarded. The only rewards that the ASF has set up is this role as a committer, so you should get commit access. Will these people who have no code experience break the code? Likely not. They know that they don't have code experience. They won't make code changes unless they know what they are doing. It's just a way of showing them that they are appreciated. What does this mean as well? There is a concept at Apache which is called meritocracy. It's quite different from what's being defined in Webster's dictionary as meritocracy. Meritocracy here means that those people take the decisions who actually do the work. Those take the decisions who make valuable contributions. Remember, contributions that further the project. They are the ones who should get commit access, they are the ones who should go on the PMC, they are the ones who should become members, etc. Plus, there is a concept, remember that people originally were having a ebbing and flowing a time schedule. That's where the merit doesn't go away, comes from. Even if you're inactive for a couple months, people still believe that you once made a valuable decision and your opinion is still valuable. No decision within projects depends on a certain percentage of people being active and online, so you can keep them on the roster, and if within 6 months' time from now you know that there's something else you want to do, you can just continue. What there is you are not bound lifelong to this project, clearly. What you can say is, hey, I clearly don't have an interest anymore, I don't have the time anymore, bye-bye. If you want, mark me as emeritus. But this is something that the committers themselves says. Now, saying thank you only gets you so much. At some point in time, you will need money. That's especially important if you have many contributors working on these on side hours, working on it on top of what they already do. Now, many of the people in these projects are well connected. Either they have connections to companies that can hire you or something else, just talk to them. What else? As soon as you get money, you will wear multiple hats. Make sure that you announce which hat you're wearing. Otherwise, you're going to confuse people. We used to have a keynote at Berlin Buzzwords where someone was giving a talk about the issues with the Hadoop community, just that they were using the slides of their vendor. Everyone in the audience thought that they were just bashing the project while they were making a very good point. So again, at Apache, you participate as an individual, not as a representative of company X. You pay with time and love, right? This may mean that something like ergonomics suddenly becomes not quite so boring anymore. I do know people who went through surgery, don't do that. I do know people who went into burnout and who did volunteer to do too much. Watch out for that. There are males dealing with this topic. You pay with time and love, well, mostly. There are machines to host your infrastructures. There are people working full-time on press, legal, and admin. That's where sponsorships come in. You don't buy influence by donating money. You support the foundation and the projects. Overall, an invitation, if you come to Apache, the invitation is you're not alone over there. There's many more people who went through this process and who can help you. Talk to dev at community. If it's an internal thing that you don't want to see discussed publicly and be discussed in the press, go to members at apache.org, go to ApacheConf, go to Flink Forward, go to FOSS Backstage. At some point, you will have to balance growing your project with full-time committers and with part-time people. There are experiences there. There are people discussing that. There are people who have experience with dealing with poisonous people who drain energy from your project. There's experience with making events happen. There's experience with handover. You don't have to go through my experience with Berlin Buzzwords, where it took me 5 years to hand things over completely. So it's not on my desk anymore. There's better ways to do it. So there's many things to think about and to talk about when you think about open source projects. My invitation is for you to come back to FOSS Backstage next year, right here, or come to ApacheCon in Montreal, where many of the more experienced people are there and are happy to talk with you about things that they don't want to share on lists in an archived way forever. But my invitation really is to go and join the dev and user list of your project, say Apache Flink if you're using that in production. You don't have to become active today, but you do already learn a ton of stuff by going on that user list and by not repeating mistakes that other people have done. And trust me, if you're there for a week or a month, you will start becoming active answering questions on your own because you can't see those questions there unanswered. One warning, though, that's your first step to being integrated. With that, I would like to thank you, and I'm happy to take a few questions.
Questions? Nobody? Last chance?
If I don't hear questions, I want to see you on the Flink mailing list.
All right, then everybody, let's thank our speaker.